We'd like to welcome everyone this evening to our 4-H Western Riding in-service training program. We hope that we've got a good turnout throughout the state to take advantage of some of the expert training that we've got for you this evening. We'd like to start by going around and taking a roll call of all of the different sites. As we look at the different sites and as you have questions throughout the evening, we hope that you'll please indicate your name and the site location where you are this evening. That way,
Thanks.
It's my pleasure now to introduce two of our special guests here in the Logan studio at Utah State University. We have Jean Alder, who is Extension Home Economist in charge of our program here with the campus field office, and also she's in charge of the 4-H horse program in Cache County. And next to her, Mr. Vaughn Knutson, trainer at Cloverleaf Arena down in Layton, Utah, and he'll be coming on with some video programming just a little bit later. Let's start off by reminding everybody that has joined us a little bit late that as you ask questions, and this is a very informal means of educational programming, that you can just walk up to the microphone and interrupt at any time, ask the question, but first identify yourself and the site in which you're at right now. Don't tell us which county you're from. Tell us which sites you're at, if you would, please. Let's start by looking at some of the objectives of our overall 4-H horse program. Number one, this takes both the state and national objectives put out by our national donor and puts them into one list. Number one is develop leadership abilities, build character, and assume citizenship responsibilities. Number two, explore career opportunities in the field of the horse program and the horse industry. Number three, develop skills, knowledge, and attitudes for lifelong use. 4, share knowledge gained with others. Certainly leadership is a great part of our 4-H program. Number 5, acquire skills in horse management by owning a horse or pony and being responsible for it. Number 6, appreciate riding as a recreation. Although we'll spend a lot of time this evening talking about the arena portion of some of the 4-H activities, riding can be a lot more than just arena work. Number 7, learn horsemanship skills and understand breeding, training, and raising of horses as a business. Number 8, acquire safety skills to prevent injury to persons and animals. And number 9, promote love and humane treatment of animals. And 10, develop sportsmanship, cooperation, and decision-making ability. We think that these 10 objectives put together the main purpose of the 4-H horse program. You noted in there that although we talk about going to the arena, some competition, there's a lot more to developing the young person than just working in the arena. Let's look now at our objectives of this video program this evening and try to zero in on what we're going to accomplish. Number 1, we hope to provide some leader and member updates on the 4-H horse program and Western riding patterns. Number 2, introduce training exercises to prepare for Western riding events. Number 3, demonstrate training exercise to prepare for Western riding. And number 4, demonstrate a finished product for the Western riding course and event. Number 5, provide optional activity suggestions for 4-H Horse Club activities. Before we get any further, we'd like to remind everybody of the events for this year. The events, of course, start with the written test, showmanship at halter, Western horsemanship, and Western riding, with poles, barrels, and keyhole as our timed events for this year. That completes the cycle of the 2-year program, so you need to be aware that in 91 and 92, we'll be shipping out Western riding and bringing on bareback equitation, and keyhole will change to the scurry race. As we go now to the exact purpose of our evening, the Western riding pattern, let's look at the 9 to 13-year-old pattern first of all, so that we might understand how the pattern runs and what we're looking for as we perform our horse through the pattern. Because the gait has become an optional portion of the 4-H pattern, you'll notice that we put markers out in front to designate an area to walk and trot from. You walk from the first green marker to the line, which is a white bar, trotting onto where the first cone would be. Notice that this pattern is a little shorter version than the full quarter horse or paint horse, stock horse type pattern that's used in most of our registered shows today. As they start past the first cone, they move into the gallop or the lope and lope throughout the entire pattern, including flying lead changes and or simple lead changes, with the younger pattern being primarily looking for a simple lead change that is clean, precise, and consistent with good cadence all the way through. As we look at the 14 to 19-year-old pattern, you'll note that it's a little larger and that the younger pattern builds on the older pattern. Notice that as that comes up on the screen, that it follows the format of most of our breed shows. Again, the gate is left out, so you walk to the first cone, trot from the first cone to the middle marker where the log is. As soon as you cross the log, again picking up the lope, going through, this time allowing simple lead changes, but encouraging flying lead changes if your horses advance that far.
Scott, do you walk or trot over the log when you're first approaching it on your first pass?
Okay, good question, Jim. As you start off, you walk from the first marker, which really isn't shown on our screen here, to the first cone in the pattern. As soon as you get to that first cone, which changes, there's no log right there. This changes to a yellow dotted line. You trot to the log. As you trot over the log, then you pick up the gallop or the canter, moving all the way around the pattern in that same gait. I think it's important that you realize that as you go around the last cone the last time and head for your stop and back, that it's not a speed up. You don't hurry so you get a long sliding stop. Here again, we're looking at the pattern, and you can see a lot of just nice, easy movements throughout the pattern, and that's what the judge is going to be looking for. This is not a stunt or a race. It's a judged event looking at a good, well-rounded, well-mannered ranch horse performing everyday duties, getting his owner around the ranch chores. So I think the most important thing we can do now is look at some of our video that Vaughn Knutson has prepared for us, and we'll let it introduce itself. So if we could look at that, please. As we're bringing up the video, I'd like to again thank Vaughn for his efforts in the program. We appreciate very much him taking the time to be with us here to answer your questions. So keep in mind questions, write them down so you don't forget as we get going through the program. We've got plenty of time for questions during the entire program, so either interrupt as we're going or hold your questions until after the first go-round. Let's look now as we go back to Cloverleaf Arena, Layton, Utah. We're here this afternoon at the Cloverleaf Arena in Layton, Utah, and we've solicited trainer Vaughn Knutson to help us with our 4-H Western riding training video today. It's a real pleasure to have Vaughn with us, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to help the young people throughout the state, as well as our volunteer leaders, better understand the preparation for Western riding and the exact training and the pattern itself. So Vaughn, why don't you tell us a little bit about these horses and the program today?
Okay. Well, I appreciate this opportunity to be able to share my viewpoints on being able to get a horse to change leads. I've shown horses in Western pleasure, reining, cow cutting, Western riding, and I find Western riding to be a very challenging class, and it's a skill, and it's art, it's a science, and there's a lot of technique that goes into being involved in getting a horse to change leads. I've been fortunate enough to be able to ride some very good horses, and that's helped me more than anything, and to learn how to make horses change leads. This first horse that we're going to demonstrate with today is owned by Janet and Randy Call from Tremont, and her name is Truckle's First Lady. She's been in a program for 2 months now on doing lead changes, and we're going to demonstrate some of the things that it takes to get her to flex and do the transitions in getting her to make a fine lead change. And what I want to illustrate is the bridle that we're going to use on her today. This bit is broken in 4 different places. It swivels on the side and on each of the middle pieces and on the side over here. And I find this a very one of the best training bits that works for me, because it can work either on the right side or the left side, or when you pull straight back, why it can work as a straight bar bit. So this is one of the best bits that I have for training our younger horses. we're going to show how to prepare a horse physically to be able to make a lead change. Before a horse is going to be ready to make a lead change, he's got to be able to go through a pleasure class. For instance, he's got to be able to walk relaxed. He's got to be able to trot and lope and know his leads and do it without worrying about it. The first thing I start to do when I get my horses to change leads is to get them so that they're flexing in the polt. I get them to flex, and then I release them. What this does is it does two things. It calls the horse to attention, and it also takes the push out of them, releasing resistance from them not wanting to make a lead change. The first thing I do is I squeeze my legs, push them forward, then I take a hold of the bit and put pressure with the chin strap against them. When the horse releases, then I release. Again, I'll let them out with their face, let them walk relaxed, and maybe this time I might change it. I'll just put the reins, or tighten the reins up and see if the horse will flex. If they do, then they're becoming more willing to respond to pressure. One of the most important things in getting a horse to change leads is having control of the shoulders. We teach a horse to walk in a circle. We'll take and we'll bend their necks in. And then we'll take and flex their neck to the outside. We've got to have control of all the working parts on a horse in order to complete a flying lead change. But to get the shoulders to working properly, we work in a circle in a left arc. I will move the shoulder to the outside, drop my rein and let him come back in. Again, move the shoulder to the outside and bring him in. I'm only doing this with my rein only. I'm not getting my horse to move outside with my leg. I bring the rein up and across and move the shoulders out with the rein. If you use your foot on this part, it's going to adjust the rib cage. So we've got to have control of the shoulders and then the rib cage. So by applying rein pressure only, we get that control of the shoulders. We're now going to flex the horse, move his shoulder out, and release. When you feel the shoulder move to the outside, immediately release the tension on the reins so the horse knows that he's done what's expected of him. Once you get the horse to where he'll move to the outside, then we get him to come inside. What I like to be able to do when I'm training my colts is to bring my inside rein in and lift my outside rein up. By lifting your outside rein up, causes your shoulder to come in. What is so hard in being able to perform these simple maneuvers is to be able to keep your horse moving forward. I lift my rein up and wait for the horse to step across, moving back out to a circle. Then we'll move to the hip of our horse and get our hip to step in. Now this colt is still learning how to do these maneuvers, and you have to wait and let the horse think about what is asking to be performed. I exaggerate my body language at times so the horse can understand what's being asked. Now we'll go ahead and reverse to the other side and do the same thing. We ask the horse to flex and release. Flex and release. I bend the neck around. Both sides. Now we'll move the shoulder out. You'll be able to see here, horse walking forward with just a touch of the rein, shoulder moving out. Once that is completed, we move the shoulder in by lifting up. Up, let the horse bring his shoulder in. Or you can counterbend him, which looks like this. That will serve as the same purpose. You can take him out or counterbend and bring him in. We also call that a reversed arc. It's very important to have your shoulders softened and loose in order to try and make lead changes on your colts. We try to bring the hip in, release, and keep going forward in your circle. Again, bring the hip in, now we'll quickly move through these exercises in a trot. We start them off in a walk so that they can learn their timing, feel, and balance. Get a horse to flex in the pole and release. Flex and release. Head in. To the outside. Now really all we want right now, we'll take the shoulder out and bring it in. Other maneuvers that will help your horse to make lead changes are when you're going forward, to stop, roll back in your circle, push them off in the other circle. Stop, roll back, push forward in your circle. This will not only help to teach a horse to work off the hind end, it'll teach a horse the neck rein so you can guide your horse through the pattern. Stop, roll back, push him off. Now the one part that we haven't talked about on our shoulders is getting them to lift. And we do that by pushing them up into the lope. When we get a horse to lope, we want the front leg to lift in the air more than stretch forward. Now this isn't like training a horse for Western pleasure. At first we're going to exaggerate and we're going to try and get more elevation in the front end to help lift the horse in his shoulder. Now you'll notice when I go to lope this horse off, I'm going to ask the front leg to come higher up in the air more than reaching forward. Once a horse is moving, you can go ahead and let him down flat. Okay, again, I flex in the pole, I keep a hold, move the shoulder out, move the hip in, and then ask the horse to lope off. See how the horse elevates in the front. That will help the horse to learn to use his back and to drive off his hip, which is so important in getting the horse to change leads, especially getting him to change from the back lead to the front lead first. At a lope, we drive the shoulders out and bring them in. Until a horse can do this, I don't think it's time to even ask him to change a lead. Again, lope the horse out and bring him in. A horse has to be able to go to the outside and come to the inside on the same lead before he's going to be able to make lead changes. Ask your horse to stop and roll back. Roll back and try to get him to lope off the first step out. If he isn't loping out, he's too heavy in the front end and he's pushing on the bit. Again, stop your horse, roll back, and lope him off. Lope. Now this mare we've just worked maybe 2 months on preparation and getting her to take leads. The more we do it, the better she's going to become at it. But right now, she's just trying to figure out what this is all about. I took a hold of her a little bit there to get her to stop and come back on her hocks. Again, we'll roll her off. There we go. I sped her up just a little bit before I stopped her so it would elevate the front end and get her to thinking about working on the back end. The main thing and most important thing on teaching a horse to change leads is to get a horse to worry about them. If you get a horse afraid of lead changes, you've got a big job in training and getting them over that fear, and it's almost next to impossible at times. Okay, now we're going to talk about the approach to a lead change. I'm going to demonstrate this horse coming across on a right lead, and I'm going to approach it to where I'm going to prepare this horse to make a left lead change, and then I'm not going to let her change yet. But I want you to see how we come across to the diagonal, collect our horse, move their shoulders so that they can make a lead change. And now we come across to the diagonal, and here we're moving the shoulder out. See how that makes the horse lope a little higher? Then take him back across. A horse has got to be able to lift his shoulders and get him out of the way before you ask him to make that initial lead change. We're loping straight, move the shoulder out. This horse is anticipating the lead change, and that's good. Just as long as the horse doesn't try to take over too much. They've got to have some anticipation so that they can prepare themselves to make the change. Open up forward, move the shoulder out. Boom. Okay, now this horse is pushing just a little bit on the bit. When she learns to accept the bridle a little better and learning to keep her nose in, this is where you come with your finished horses. But right now she's learning how to prepare herself to make a lead change. Now we're going to do the same thing going the other direction. Now I'm in a left lead. I keep my right leg against my horse to keep her loping smoothly across. At this point I take my right rein and adjust the shoulder. And lope her back around. You've got to be able to keep a horse loping smoothly and fluently in order to perform your transition. Move the shoulder to the outside, strictly with the rein and not my leg. Lope off. Now we're going to try and perform a lead change. If it doesn't work, we're not going to worry about it. We're not going to get after the horse. We'll just go back and try again. Now you notice the amount of energy that this horse exerted in trying to complete that task. A lead change for a horse is hard until he learns how. And once he learns how, it becomes very easy. Okay, now this mare had to work hard at getting that change. When she finds out how easy it is, it'll become a lot easier for her not to put so much energy into it and try so hard. Once a horse makes a lead change, it's important to let him lope off or stop and walk him, but at least let him relax and have some kind of a reward for completing that task. You want a horse always to work for a reward. The main thing in getting a horse to change leads is not to get him afraid of it. Move the shoulder over. Now this time after she makes the lead change, I'll stop her and walk her off. We want her to realize that once she gives us what she wants, that there's going to be some kind of a benefit or a payoff for her. I will pick her up, go through the working parts of getting the flex, moving the shoulder out. Even though they're rough, I don't worry about it. You've got to let a horse win and work through it and struggle with it till they learn how to become better. Little by little, they'll flatten it out themselves and make it a lot easier. Move the shoulder out. Now see, already this mare now is starting to work at it easier. Okay. When I'm doing a lead change, I'll really squeeze with my legs and drive them forward up onto the bridle. Move the shoulder. There. That was a good change for this mare. My preparation in getting the horse to change is I squeeze with both legs, make sure the horse is flexing, move the shoulder out, release my inside leg, and squeeze with my outside. And see, after each lead change, I give a horse a rest of some kind. One of the most important things in a lead change is after you complete the change is to keep loping on a straight line. Too many people want to change their direction of travel after a lead change. That's wrong. Move your shoulder, make your lead change, and keep going forward. Then change your direction. If you change your direction right after a lead change, pretty soon that's why we get our horses that only change the front end and not the back end. Well, what I try to do is make 3, maybe 4 changes a day on a horse and then leave them alone. If you practice lead changes too much, the horse will get very resentful and will quit doing them. So if I come out on like this colt tomorrow and I'm going to do lead changes, I might get 1 change to the right, 1 to the left, walk off and maybe work on getting her to turn around a little bit. Then I'll go back and lope her and get maybe another one on each side, and I'll quit for the day on teaching my horse to change leads. It's very important to keep your horse's feet up in the shoulders. They've got to be able to cross over. They've got to be able to go out, come in, and lift up in order to make the change. We've got to have a horse knowing how to use its back and to drive off its hock in order to complete the lead change.
Well, Vaughn, that looked quite simple as you went through all those easy step-by-step procedures. I'm kind of excited to go out and try them on my horse. Let's start by opening up to questions from throughout the state. Maybe we could start off with a question I have. I noticed that you ride a little more forward in your seat than some of the trainers I've seen. Do you have a purpose in doing that?
I think that possibly on our young colts that you do ride a more forward seat because of your balance. You want to be able to keep your feel, timing, and balance. And I think sometimes if you sit forward in your seat, as that horse is trying to make a transition into a lead change, that the cantle of the saddle won't project you forward. If you slide up into the saddle, you'll be able to keep more of a balanced seat.
Okay, very good. You have some questions from the field, please.
Scott, this is Snow College.
Yes, Sam.
This
who
is
at
Sam.
Snow College?
This is Sam.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
My question is, we've had a lot of Western riding horses that do well in pleasure, but we have to use them in barrels and poles as well. Question I have is, I have a lot of horses that will get higher in the Western riding than in the barrels and the poles. Now, we don't practice this pattern. We break it down, do figure eights, do circles. What can we do on these horses to keep them calm coming into the Western riding pattern?
Vaughn, go ahead.
As I'm thinking about your question, the thing that I picture in my mind is a horse that you're trying to contain too much. I've seen Western riding horses go through a Western riding pattern almost the speed of a pole bending horse. And as they make those lead changes and they keep the same amount of cadence, why it does look pretty, and it's better than seeing a horse that's contained too much. Also, I think that what makes them nervous is a horse doesn't really know how to change leads. People don't realize how hard it is to make a horse change leads and do it relaxed. So I would think, in answer to your question, that I would try to open my horse up a little bit more, not try to contain it, and maybe make wider circles around the cone. On this, if there's possible, at some point in time, I want to revert back to pattern 2 as it shows on the screen. We try to lope our horses through the pattern like it's illustrated, and it's terribly hard to do that unless we've got a very finished horse.
Okay, that was our other question, was just how fast can you go or how slow should you go to get, say, maximum points?
Well, obviously, we're going to show a picture of more of a finished pattern later on. The slower that your horse goes, the more points you're going to make. But obviously, if you go too slow and your horse isn't changing leads or it's acting up like you illustrated before, you're going to lose points. So it'd be better to lope through faster and show a horse more at ease in making its changes than it would to contain it, make it go slow, and make it look worse.
Another question, please. Don't be bashful. Step right up to those microphones and ask that question you've always wanted. Here in the studio, if there are some questions, feel free to step up to our microphone over here.
Vaughn,
Who have we got, please?
this is Ross Bradford at Orem.
Okay, Ross, go ahead.
I was wondering, the program for the 4-H has like a 2-year period on, and then they change events again. And I was wondering how long you feel that it would actually take to put this Western riding horse into where he does the pattern the way that you would like it, like in a time frame. I don't know how to say it. You wouldn't expect him to do it just in a matter of week or weeks or something. Doesn't it take you quite a bit of time to do this, so that we don't defeat our purpose a little bit by trying to hurry right through the pattern?
That's a good question, Ross. I look at a minimum of 4 months trying to develop a pattern on my horses. It seems to me that once you, like the horse that we just illustrated on the video, it would take another 60 days to get her to loping through a pattern relaxed. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll lope through the first 2 or 3 lead changes and the horse does it relaxed, and then, like the question before, maybe a horse starts getting nervous and tense and anticipating the change and worrying about it. So we may go through maybe 2 or 3 cones without a change and start over again. And little by little we build on our horse. But I think if you've got a horse that'll walk, trot, lope, and do it relaxed, well, it takes almost 4 months, I think, to prepare a horse to start loping through a pattern. Unless you've got an exceptionally good horse that can accept that kind of pressure, why, I think it's a pretty long time frame.
Thanks, Vaughn.
Vaughn, I noticed that you didn't work that younger horse through any pattern. There were no cones involved. You did do some changes, but never through the pattern. Was there a purpose for that?
What I want is enough room that I can take my horse and build on the approach. I don't think we're given enough emphasis on the approach to a lead change. If it takes me 150 feet or 150 yards, I want to be able to have the room of being able to position that horse to make the transition. If we start trying to teach our horse to change leads going through the pattern, let's say that there's 30 feet between each cone, then we're challenging our horse to make that change within that 30 feet. And if it doesn't make the change, then it's our human nature to try and force it to make the change. The only time I start working through a Western riding pattern is when I feel my horse is relaxed enough that I can make 3, possibly 4 lead changes in that amount of feet without it worrying about it.
Okay, looks like we have a question here in Logan's studio. Janet?
Hi. Our question is, for the 4-H purpose, Vaughn, would you feel it's better to have these kids do the simple lead change and achieve a smooth lead change rather than try for the flying lead change and not be able to get it or mess their horse up?
I think, to begin with, that I think it would be my objective if we can't complete a lead change. Obviously, I would do simple lead changes. And I would try to teach the youth the pattern and how to position our horse to make that change. Sometimes I've seen horses that have been presented a Western riding course and done simple lead changes, and pretty soon the horse will anticipate that, and some horses will learn to make a lead change. But for the sake of this program, I think I would do a simple lead change until the horse is capable of doing one.
This is Gordon Chapman. He's from Weber State.
Go ahead, Gordon.
I was just wondering when, if you use the same bit on a finished horse, and if not, when you change the bit and what you go to.
Okay, on our finished horse that we're going to show next on the video, we're going to show more of a bit that we put on our finished horses. And I think this will answer your question on that.
Okay, Vaughn, you mentioned you'd like to look at the pattern number 2 again. We've got that ready to show.
Okay.
Would you like to talk them through that one more time?
I would.
After we get through with the going through the pattern, then we'll show the finished horse so that we can maybe answer some more questions about the final performance.
Scott, do we have time for one more question? This
You
is
bet.
Sam
Go
at
ahead.
Snow
Go
College.
ahead with the question there. Where are you?
At Snow College.
Okay.
What we were talking about here, you know, in 4-H you try to cram a lot into a short period of time in these summers. We were talking about using a running martingale to achieve a headset. Can you do that at the same time you're working the pattern? Is that going to foul up any work that you're going to do on even an older horse?
Okay, this deals with the use of a running martingale at the same time you're training and flexing, Vaughn.
I think that a running martingale is a good tool to use. I would probably recommend possibly a snaffle bit with it, or maybe a little more mild bit than what I demonstrated earlier. Something else that I use in conjunction with this are what we call draw reins. I like the draw reins because it keeps the neck just a little bit leveler, or it will make a horse become more level. And I want a horse to learn to use his neck for leverage and balance. That's something that you don't hear many people talk about. But it's hard for a horse to make a pretty lead change if he's too arched in the neck. And if he gets behind the vertical in the face, then he's going to become hollow-backed, or he's going to change in front of the withers. The thing that martingales do would help to present like the first initial step into a lead. Like I talked about on the video, we want a horse to elevate in the front end, and I think the martingale would help that. Once a horse achieves that, I would probably go to a draw rein, trying to help the horse become more level in the neck and trying to constitute bringing the hock up underneath the horse further.
I have a question.
Okay, if you could identify your site and your name, please.
My name's Rebecca Christensen from Provo, Utah. And I see a lot of kids when they try to push their horses into lead changes, and they rush them. They don't really realize how long it takes to get a horse picking up the basic leads and doing that and working off the haunches. My daughter's been in dressage a little bit, and I've realized how long it actually takes the horse to prepare it. A lot of the times they throw intermediates into flying changes, and I don't think it's right, because a lot of parents don't have the knowledge to get out there and watch them and show them how to do that. How do they get the training? And I know after watching this video to go out, a lot of horses don't react the same way that one horse did. A lot of times they're wrecked because they're not, they don't know how to counteract some of the fits the horses go into. How do you work with kids and try to get them to get their horse to do lead changes without wrecking them, with really no instruction on how to do this?
I think without instruction, it's almost next to impossible. I know that I've had to go to a lot of people for help. I've read books. I think there are videos available that I see on the market now that would be good, and an instructional video like the one that we've tried to make here would be good. But the thing that would help kids the most, youth, amateurs, or anybody else trying to learn to make a horse change leads, is to dissect it and to get each maneuver to where they can do it. I think a lot of times we don't place the importance on dissecting the working parts of a horse and having control of them. Until we have the control of the working parts of a horse, it's not smart for us to go ahead and try a lead change.
All right, let's look at that pattern for just a second, and Vaughn can talk about maneuvering the horse through there.
Okay, if you can see it on your screen, you'll see that after we cross the log, we pick up the lope. If you'll notice on your screen where we lope around the first turn, it shows that possibly on the screen, possibly 2 to 3 feet is all the distance there is between your horse and that first cone. A smarter way to do this is to lope your horse maybe 10 to 12 feet on past that cone that you're going to turn around. Then as you're coming up the other side, you want to come straight towards the first cone. And as you watched on our horse changing leads, that way it gives you an approach and more time to be able to change the shoulder on the horse, be able to move the shoulder and then make your transition. And you want to be able to count your strides. For instance, you may want to go 2, possibly 3 strides, change your lead, and then go straight towards the next cone. And if you have to, take a horse further out away from the cones. This pattern shows that we come right up past the cones next to them, but a smarter way of doing it is giving yourself more distance. Go deeper into the pattern and go further away from the cones to give you more time and allowing you to prepare your horse to make the lead change.
Very good. I think that's something that's very important, and I think we can demonstrate that a little bit in this next segment of the video with a little more finished horse. So let's go ahead and look at the white horse now as we watch more of a finished pattern in progress.
Our illustration today, I'm going to use a horse that belongs to Steve Hatch. This horse's name is St. Bar Pick. I started him last year. They brought him to me as a troubled horse who had problems. He'd been used more or less for a queen horse and a team roping horse, and they wanted to get some training on this horse to make him a better finished working animal. As we got in and rode this horse more, we discovered that he has the ability to make lead changes. I was able to compete against last year's world champion on this horse, and he did beat him. And he has had several wins to his credit. We showed him 10 times last year, and he did pick up wins through that time. This year we're going to campaign him extensively, trying to make him one of the top 10 horses in the nation for Western riding. I'd like to show you the bit that I use on this horse. As far as I know, the name is a correction bit for this, and it's just more of the same bit as what I use on my younger horses. It gives me the feel off the right side of their mouth or the left side, or it just breaks through the middle. And I like a horse that will give a lot of tongue relief. Those horses can put their tongues up through the middle of this, and it works on the bars and through the roof of their mouth as a signal. Riding horses is we'll put a tie out for them to lope over rather than a log. If they can lope over a tie, why they can make any crossover of hold that you'll see it as shown. Okay, now see, you'll notice that I kind of push a horse out away from the cone. Now on our last changes here, instead of coming right close to the pattern, I give myself plenty of room so that I can maneuver and prepare for the next lead change. You notice that I don't go straight into a change. Now right here, I'll move the shoulder out and ask him to change so that I can make the approach for the tie, or the log as it says in the pattern. Again, I move the shoulder out, make the change, and go wide around the cone. I don't try to come in close to the cones. I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble. Now right here, what you want to do is you've got to be real careful. A horse that can change leads will try to change on you coming up through the middle. So I'll keep my outside leg against my horse, trying to keep him loping straight.
I think anyone who can run a pattern like that certainly deserves a blue ribbon in 4-H or probably anywhere else you want to go. Some of you are wondering, boy, where do I go from here? And my horse isn't even as far along as the first sorrel horse. That's why we've asked Gene Alder to help us with a little segment in which you get some dominance over your horse to start with. Go back into the corral, do a little lunging with your horse, and try to get his attention to start with and work on his head settle a bit and his cadence. So Gene, let's look at that segment, and then we'll open the final part of the program up to any questions we may have on everything.
Scott, we have a question here in Orem before you go on to this next one.
Okay, Jim, go ahead.
This is Tiffany. My horse in the Western Pleasure and the Western Riding pattern is always throwing her head and just tossing it. Is there anything that I can do to stop it?
I might answer that just real quickly by saying stay tuned, because this next segment is going to discuss that exact question and problem. And if you don't get an answer, then we'll come back to that, Tiffany. Thanks.
A horse is a herd animal, and in any herd there is dominant and recessive individuals. As you're working with your horse to establish discipline, you need the horse to decide that you are dominant. You can dominate aggressively or you can dominate passively. I'm going to show you a way to work with your horse to establish dominance by compliance and not by force. Use a tightly fitted halter, a chain or halter lead with a long chain, in the side with a chain, over the top, in the other side, and snap to the ring by the throat latch, with the snap being out so it doesn't dig your horse. If your horse's head is carried down below the wither, he is expressing compliance to you and discipline and obedience. We establish that by using a milking motion on your horse so that his head comes down. As his head comes down, rub him on the forehead so that he is rewarded. If you put their head down and pat them, they don't like that. Rub them. Don't pat them. Most horses do not like to be patted. He's going to move backwards, trying to get out of the compliance and the resistance. And again, you ask them to put their head down. Oh. 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 When their head goes down, you reward them. Let's try it with the other horse. Ask his head to come down. When it comes down, then reward him by rubbing and praising him. As your horse stands with their head down, they are then recognizing that you are the dominant individual, and you will then have control over them, and they won't be running all over you. This can also be used as training in showmanship class, to train them to walk and then put their head down and trot. As your vet comes, he will be very happy that you can put your horse's head down. As the horseshoer comes, he will be used to obeying you and not jumping on the top of your horseshoer. So this is one way to establish discipline with your horse in a non-intrusive manner that they don't resist. The equipment that's needed for lunging a horse is a well-fitted halter that's tight around the nose and around the throat latch. I prefer a cotton lunge line, which is breakable. This one has been broken and mended several times, but if you get into a wreck, it will break. It is also more comfortable on the hand than a nylon, and you don't have burnt hands as much as you might. Then we need a head stall. I prefer a head stall with an egg butt or a D-ring, which swivels on the ring and does not pinch the horse's mouth. This ring snaffle, the ring continuously moves on the joint and can easily pinch your horse in the corners of the mouth as it would where her fingers are on the bit. Then we need reins These are side reins that you would use from the bit back to the saddle or to the surcingle. I like these snaps because they're soft and they will stretch. Again, if you get in a wreck, they're going to come off the bit, which is much more preferable to having them stay hard and fast as you're training a horse. These have been made from webbing that's been bought at any Army Navy store. You can also use a continuous rein for lunging. This again is a cotton webbing with snaps that are soft and will break if you get into a wreck. Then also a lunge whip is your primary aid when you are lunging. The longer they are with a longer tail would be preferable to a shorter one. First of all, we're going to teach this horse to whoa and stand still before we move on to lunging him. You must teach your horse to whoa as you stand any place in relation to him. If he wants to move, you go back and tell him whoa, so you can move all the way around your horse, and he will stand still. Oh. As you make him stand still, then you move back to the hip and drive him to start to lunge. Drive him from the hip so that he moves away from you. They have a tendency to want to face you. If you stay back at the hip, you will have less trouble. With a green horse, you usually have little trouble getting them to go faster. But if you need to, use your dressage, your lunge whip, trot. You'll notice I did not hit the horse with it. I used the lash to move them forward. Oh, oh, oh. We will now show you how we go to lunging a horse off the bit and the equipment that we use for that. One of the problems we have as we move from lunging off a halter to lunging off a bit is to using reins, tying the horse down solid, and having them flip over and damage themselves and their mouth. An alternative to that is using a bridle with a lariat, and this is discussed more completely in a videotape by Richard Schrake called Resistance-Free Training, which is available in the audiovisual library through USU. The headstall with a ring snaffle bit and a lariat. The lariat goes over where the pole was on the horse, through the bit, and then it will go between the horse's front legs and over his barrel. The ends of the lariat then will go between the front legs of the horse, over his barrel, and don't pull them very tight. Then you take the ends of the lariat and wrap them several times around the other one. On the other side, we will do the same thing. We then have the horse bitted up, so as he comes up, he will feel the resistance of the bit. But if he throws a fit, it's going to give, and he will not hurt himself. The rope over the pole has a tendency to keep the head down, and he will get pressure on the bit. We will now lunge this horse with this equipment on it. When you have this lariat around their barrel, they are going to feel pressure on the bit. But if they have a little bit of an exciting episode, you are not going to end up with a horse hurt. You can see how there is a gentle amount of pressure on the bit when this horse puts his head up. As he drops his head, he relieves the pressure on the bit and gives himself relief. We will now show how we would move then to solid reins to continue the lunging lesson for a horse. We would progress from lunging with the lariat to side reins that would be attached up by the horn or high on the surcingle, and then move them down until you got the horse's head in the position that you wanted for whatever type of event you were going to be working in. We'll now move on and lunge the horse with this equipment. You notice as we're lunging this horse, we're using the corner of a corral. It's nice if you have a round corral, but definitely not necessary. Lunging is a way to establish discipline with your horse. If you lunge a horse on the end of a halter rope, let him jump and play and run, you are not establishing any discipline. He is just being allowed to play and do his own thing. As you lunge a horse, you can also establish their gaits, rhythm, regularity. If a horse cannot maintain a steady gait that you want for your performance on a lunge line without a rider, they cannot establish and maintain that gait with a rider on. As with many things in training horses in 4-H, it is advantageous for an adult and a youth to work together on this. The lunging that we've shown today is not done and progressed over a period of several hours. It would take several days or several weeks. You'll notice that I have driven. I drive the horse always from the hip, and the cue to stop is to put your whip or your hand out in front, ask him to whoa, and he will stop. Thank you.
That was an excellent presentation, I believe, on getting the horse to flex and give to the bit, which is really one of the first things you've got to do even before you start riding your horse. You can start some of your younger horses doing that, and yet it's something you can come back to on older horses when you have a little problem with their head set or things not flexing just the way you want. Are there some questions out there for Jean about this exercise? And Tiffany, did that answer your question?
Well, what about when I'm riding her without a lunge line and without the lariat or whatever the reins are called? I didn't catch that.
One thing I think 4-Hers need to learn is soft, accepting hands, and learn to give to your horse as soon as they give you any compliance. When she gives her head and comes down, you need to learn to relax your hands and give to the horse. When you're standing and doing nothing with your horse, make sure you've given her all the rein there is so that they stand still and they are rewarded. Often what they're trying to do by flipping their head is get more rein, and you don't reward them enough when they are doing what you would like them to do.
Thank you.
Other questions that we may have from throughout the state? We want to open it up for questions for Jean or Vaughn at this point. I think we cut you a little short as we looked at the videotape of the white horse doing the finish pattern, and we'd certainly want you to come back with your questions now.
We have another one here in Utah County, Scott.
All right, Jim, go ahead.
I was wondering if your horse stops and you try to make him go and he won't go.
All right, that's an excellent question, and I've faced that same problem many times. Vaughn, would you like to address that for us?
Well, I think that we need to learn to encourage our horse to move forward through our legs. What I do first is I move my hand forward up the neckline of the horse. I then use a secondary cue through my legs, and I take both legs and I squeeze with them. If that does not get my horse to move forward, then I do a kicking motion. I turn my toes out, bring my heels in, and do a kicking motion with my horse. If that doesn't help, Of course, we can use a spur on our heel to also encourage a horse to do that. But in order to use a spur, I do not use a kicking motion. I turn my toe out, toe up, place the spur on the side of a horse, and then I roll my toe down. By rolling my toe down, it will place leverage against the horse and will apply somewhat of more of leverage to force that horse to go forward. Then obviously, as the horse does move forward, quickly release the pressure off his side so he learns that when your heel or your spurs touch the side of him that he moves forward and the pressure is released.
Okay. That goes back to those 4 basic aids that we use in working with our horses: voice, weight, hands, and legs. Other questions?
Scott, Kevin Kessler, Salt Lake County.
Yes, Kevin.
What about on your pattern that you're talking about for the older age group? In arenas that are too small, or in our case where we have to split our arena and run 2 different age groups in the same arena, are we better off making our cones smaller to allow them more room around the ends like Vaughn was talking about earlier? Or is it better benefit to our kids to have the cones further apart?
Okay, that's a good question. The pattern calls for distances not less than 30 nor more than 50 feet, and of course the larger the pattern, the more easy it is to maneuver through and have the room you need to make those lead changes. Vaughn, what do you think as far as room on the outside versus room between the cones?
I definitely am one to try and get the most distance in a pattern that we can possibly use. If I had to sacrifice anything, it would probably be what I call the top end, and that's after you've come up through the first 5 basic lead changes and then go around that end. I think that you could sacrifice distance there, but where I would want the most distance is being able to go on the bottom end of my pattern so that I can come in on a straight approach. Also, as I think about it, I think as we go in and out of our cones, say that we are set up on a 30-foot pattern, make our turns around our cones wider. Make more of a serpentine pattern rather than a straight line going up through them.
On the top end, are you talking about where the horse makes the first turn or where the horse enters?
I would call that where we end, where we come up through the first 5 changes and go around the other side to go across the pattern. For instance, like where we pick up our lope and go down around that first cone, that's where I would want the most distance so that I could come in on the approach in a straight line. Then weave through the serpentine, or do more of a serpentine pattern than straight up through. And then as it shows on the pattern there, as we come across widthways, well, you could come across with less distance. And then what you want to do is you make that left-handed turn, go back towards the top of your pattern. See, this pattern shows that you go straight across for the other cone, and that's wrong for the horse. What you want to do is make a wide turn around that top cone and turn and go back to the top of the pattern. That way you can make a longer approach and position the shoulders to make the turn.
So what you're doing is actually fading back towards that cone at the top of the serpentine side.
That's right.
So that you got a little more flex in your horse.
The way this pattern's drawn out, it encourages a horse to change in the front and not behind. See, as you see that line going across to the other cone, across their width, you've got to move the shoulder way over to the left in order to get a horse positioned to change in a straight line. So if you come around the cone and fade back towards the top of the cone, it's easier for the horse to move his shoulder and to bring his hind end up under to make the lead change.
Scott, Ben Tuller and Weber.
Go ahead, Ben.
The next time you redo that rule book, would it be helpful if Vaughn were to draw that pattern as it's actually written so that it would help them? I noticed in our shows they follow that pattern exactly like it is, and I think with his explanation that's incorrect.
I think Gene's just made a valuable comment here. That's a rule book, not a training book, and thus if you looked at the quarter horse or paint horse or any of the others, you'd find it's drawn just exactly the same way. So the idea is to not get lost going between the cones, but as you work with your horses and work with various trainers and the volunteer leaders who are helping these young people, that they need to understand for the advantage of the horse and rider to go a little bit broader.
We have another question here in Orem for Vaughn.
Hold that one for just a second, Jim, and we'll pick up a comment from Vaughn first.
I was just going to say that when we're back at the World Show, whether it be the quarter horse or paint or whatever it might be, that I don't ever see a horse loping the way this pattern's drawn in the rule book. Everything I've seen is going in straight lines when you're crossing across your pattern. So even back at the World Shows, I don't see horses loping the way this pattern's been designed.
Okay, good point, but yet the main point of the rule book is to get them through the procedure without getting lost and going in the wrong place. Back to Orem now for a question.
We had a couple people here wondering about how you go around the last cone, Vaughn. Whether you take it wide too as you're coming down the straightaway for the stop in the back. Do you take it wide and come straight into the middle, or do you try and cut it close and then turn into the middle?
That's a very good question, and that approach there sets up whether you're going to be able to lope down the middle of the arena successfully or not. What I try to do after I make my lead change is I turn that cone at the same distance that I have the others to finish my pattern. But I go straight across the pattern so that I'm in the middle of the arena, or the middle of the pattern, to lope up it. Then if my horse wants to anticipate a lead change, like going back to the right, you can veer it back to the left just a teeny bit, encouraging the horse to stay on a left lead. But if you turn that cone too close, and if you happen to move your horse off a little bit to the right, he's going to want to change his leads rather than continue loping up through the arena.
How serious is that to get a lead change coming up the middle?
Well, if you're in a pretty tough contest, that is a broken pattern. And a broken pattern sometimes can disqualify. It does not call for a lead change there, so that if your horse breaks to a trot or tries to change leads, it's anticipation, broken pattern, and could eliminate you.
So you want to kind of plan ahead at that point so that you can keep that right leg against them, keep them into the left-hand lead, and still have room to do it without veering off the pattern center.
Exactly, and that's what I was saying before. If you're loping up through the middle of the pattern, if that horse anticipates a change to the right, you can always veer back to your left and make it up past the log before you stop him.
Other questions, please?
Yeah, this is Irv Glenn from Weber County. I was wondering, is it wrong for these younger kids to take a hold of these horses with both hands on the reins to do simple lead changes?
I think in your training that would be helpful, but I think in the show, unless you're in a snaffle bit, I think they're going to mark you down for two hands on the bit, or the reins, I should say. I know what you're saying, and it would be more helpful that if we could ride two hands, but I still think that your judges are going to mark you down if you do so.
Do we have any questions from the sites that we haven't heard from? How about down in Sevier? Did we get a crew down there, Clyde?
This is from Wasatch.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, back to Wasatch, please.
I'm my horse when I use draw reins or...
Okay, Wasatch, I don't want to interrupt you, but we're having a hard time getting all the words. You're kind of cutting in and out. Try it one more time.
Okay. On my horse when I use draw reins or running martingale, she'll work just fine. She'll keep her head down, but right as I take them off, her head's right back up. What can I do to correct this?
Vaughn?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind when you're riding with draw reins and I'm running martingale is that you're not giving any release to your horse. And this is one of the bad sides of a draw rein or a running martingale, is that we don't learn to turn loose of the pressure. All the time that you're riding with those aids, you need, every time your horse does something, is to turn loose of the mouth. And that way you can teach your horse to maintain that position. But if you don't turn loose, your horse never learns to hold that position on its own.
Gene, what do you think about the question? What would you try to have these young people do?
Well, I think the exercises that we demonstrated in lunging, where the horse is teaching himself to get off the bit. He can work forward and develop rhythm and teach himself to get off the bit, and then if you have hands that are kind and release and give them a reward, then that will help your horse from flipping his head and from getting a different frame when you take the run and martingale and the draw reins off.
Okay, thanks, Gene. Let's try Sevier again. Were there questions down there in Richfield? We have people there, but no questions. Looks like our trainers this evening have done a great job. Other questions from other sites?
Scott, this is Dan Nelson in Green River.
Yes, Dan.
We have one of the young people that has a problem with the horse continually tending to hold its nose to the right. We're wondering how to correct that.
All right, Vaughn?
Okay, as I visualize this problem, I see a horse that's braced in its left shoulder and through the rib cage. If I was loping my horse on the left lead or trotting it, and it was holding its head to the right like on the video, or the horse that we showed first on the video, I would take and move that shoulder to the outside. Release the pressure. If its nose goes back to the right, I would do it again. Eventually that horse will learn to hold that nose to the inside to keep you from taking his shoulder to the outside. But that horse is leaning and braced on its left shoulder and through its rib cage.
Very good. So we've got to go back to those original suppling exercises and get that horse willing to give both the shoulder both directions. Dixie, questions down there?
Good. I got a young lady right next to me here that has a question she's just dying to have answered.
Okay, let's move down to St. George then, Dixie College.
Laney, go ahead.
I'd like to know what is the proper way to hold your reins?
Okay, that's a good question and a very basic question. Jean, what's the 4-H way as far as holding reins?
Well, when you hold your reins, it would be probably preferable for you to hold them in the left hand and for your reins to come between, on top of your index finger and underneath it, and then down the bottom of the hand and off to the left-hand side. If you're using a Rommel, which is a single rein with a tail, your reins, both reins would come up through your hands, and then you would hold the Rommel on the other hand down by your leg or by the side of the saddle.
Very good. And I think the key with the split reins is that you hold them in one hand and the tail hangs down the same side, whether it be left or right-handed. Always the tail will hang down the same side as the hand that you're holding the reins with. But as Gene indicated, left hand is usually preferred. Vaughn?
Something that comes to my mind is what do we do with our free hand? In Western Pleasure, possibly you've seen it to where we let it hang straight down our side. But as you get into a Western horsemanship class or a Western riding or a reining class, to add balance to your riding, you would want to have your free hand come across the middle of you rather than hang straight down.
Good point. Good point. Other questions, please.
This is Becky from North Summit, and I have a horse that is really good at showing, and he picks up every lead and everything, but we can't get a bit in his mouth. He won't take anything. He rides in a hackamore.
Okay. Another tough question, and it's important that you realize that unless you ride with the proper equipment in each class, that you face the challenge of making a blue ribbon run and receiving a red ribbon, or making a red ribbon run and being dropped to a white ribbon. Let's see about correcting the problem. Vaughn?
I would want to know more about the horse and the background that it's been through in order to completely answer this question. I've never had a horse that I couldn't get to accept the snaffle bit. And if I do put a snaffle bit on my horse, they've got to learn that when you apply pressure that they have to surrender to the pressure. That could be a session in itself on trying to talk about that, but I would put a snaffle bit on my horse. I would ask it to possibly look to the right. I would release the pressure when the horse does. As the horse is what we call accepting the bit, then we move into bits with leverage on them, therefore using a chin strap. But I would have to look into the horse's background more to know why the horse does not want to accept the bit.
Several problems that may have occurred in his past. He may have teeth problems. He may have had a cut tongue that has caused him a little grief in the past, and he may be just a little scared of it. But like Vaughn says, in most cases you can get the bit in the first time and get them used to it through these suppling exercises and make a really good show horse out of it. Sounds like he's already performing just right. We've got time for a couple more questions if you have them, please.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Severe, and I had a question about my horse.
Okay.
In the riding pattern, he'll do right lead changes, but he won't change to the left. And when I try him in a figure 8, he will only change to the left and he won't change to the right. I don't know what to do about it. Is there anything you can suggest that I can change that?
Okay. Sounds like maybe he's changing on his own rather than changing to your cues, Vaughn.
Well, too, I think if you'll go back and watch this video, possibly we don't have enough forward motion being gained by our leg. It sounds to me like that you need to encourage your horse to drive harder off his hock with your legs. The one exercise that I think of is loping in a circle, stopping, do a rollback, and getting your horse to lope off in the first stride. I think if you try this, you might find that your horse is either loping off or taking 2 or 3 strides before it's going into the lead. So I would encourage you to use more leg pressure and just encourage that horse a little bit more that way. And I think that you'll find that your horse will do the lead change.
Thank you.
One last quick question.
Scott, we have a two-pronged one here in Orem.
We may not get to the second prong, Jim.
Okay, we have one young man whose horse tucks its nose too far, and then we also want to know if just the video with the 2 horses will be available, or whether it will be in the whole video package.
Okay, quickly, it'll be the whole video package, and you can edit it down from there. Vaughn, 1 minute.
Real quickly, I've had this problem a lot too. It's a very easy problem to get into. The horse gets behind the vertical, and it's a severe problem almost sometimes it is for a horse to hold his head too high and to go hollow in the back. But the thing that we're finding out that will take care of this problem is to lengthen the stride on your horse. If you lengthen the stride on your horse, it'll take the arc out of his neck and bring the horse back into placement in his face.
Very good. We spend a lot of time talking about arena work, and we just want to reiterate one more time that 4-H is for the development of the young person just as much as the horse, if not more, and we hope that they'll spend a lot of hours outside the arena, trail riding, horse packing, working on leadership skills, giving demonstrations, and much, much more through their 4-H program. I'd like to thank Vaughn Knutson, trainer from Cloverleaf Arena, Layton, Utah, and Gene Alder, home economist and horse program leader here in Cache County, for their time and efforts, and all of the host site coordinators who have been with us down throughout the state. Most of all, we'd like to thank the people in the audiences for being with us, and we hope that it's been a valuable experience for you. Please, site coordinator, give us a final count as to who is there or how many people were there, and then also make sure the evaluation forms are passed around and filled out. Collect them if you would, please. Folks, thanks for being with us. Happy trails.